Welcome to Beyond the Coverage. I'm Chris Horner. Today's episode brought to you by Bicycle, the largest global marketplace for pre-owned bikes with over 20,000 pre-owned and refurbished bikes, from road bikes to mountain bikes and everything in between. Bicycle's connecting the buyers and the sellers to make the process safe, easy, and convenient. Now let's get into today's episode because I want to talk about what the plans could be, what the strategy is for UAE team members in tomorrow's stage 1 of the Giro d'Italia. Now, he's Tadej Pogacar, right? The big-time first-page rider, the only rider on the first page. Everybody else, 10, 12 different riders on page 2, but Tadej Pogacar is the hands-down favorite. This year he's getting ready to do the Giro and he's getting ready to do the Tour de France, so it's the double, right? But what does the Slovenian want to do on tomorrow's stage 1? How do we know what UAE team member strategy will be? Well, if I back the film up to last year's Tour de France, on stage 1, a 180-kilometer stage through the north of Spain, we know that Tadej Pogacar and UAE team members lit it up on the last climb, with Yates going hard up the beginning of the climb, then Tadej Pogacar trying to dislodge Jonas Vingegaard, but he couldn't get rid of Jonas Vingegaard or Victor Lefebvre from Cofidis, so he went over the top. Then they started playing tactical games, right? Then we got the two Yates brothers going up the road. One of them, Adam Yates, the teammate of Tadej Pogacar, UAE team members, went up the road, ended up winning the stage, and took the race leader's yellow jersey. So, could we see something like that in tomorrow's stage 1? There's a little bit of differences between tomorrow's stage 1 of the Giro d'Italia and the Tour de France's stage 1 because, of course, this year at the Giro, Tadej Pogacar's got to save some form for the Tour de France coming afterwards. But have we ever seen the Slovenians save form? I don't think so. We've never seen him. So I'm going to use that stage 1 of last year's 23 Tour de France as a model here of what Tadej Pogacar will probably do in tomorrow's stage 1. I think they'll try to control the stage, keep the break that's attacking early on the flatter part of the sections, because remember, it's only a 141-kilometer stage tomorrow, and when they hit that Category 2 climb that's 7 kilometers long at 6.5%, sure, Tadej Pogacar is going to want to light that up and get himself in the pink jersey, and then try to wear the pink jersey from the first stage all the way into the Giro. He's probably going to go for something like 10 stage wins here at the Giro d'Italia, but that's not my strategy. That's his strategy. That's what we saw at stage 1 at the Tour de France last year, and I think it's what we'll see again here. So he's going to have to keep the break in check, not let him get too far up the road. And I imagine they're going to try to hope that some of the other teams put a little pressure and help out on the front of the peloton to put pressure of the breakaway riders going up the road and keep it kind of close so that when they get into that Category 2 climb at the finish of tomorrow's race, Tadej Pogacar has 7 kilometers to dislodge everyone. Now, what's the difference about tomorrow's stage and that stage 1 of the Tour de France? Well, the big difference I already told you. We have the Tour de France coming later. So UAE team members, their director sportif, Machin, he might be thinking, okay, I'm telling Tadej Pogacar to save energy. I'm letting the break go up the road. But he might think, well, Tadej Pogacar told me he wants to win as many stages as possible. He wants to be in the pink jersey, and he wants to dominate this Giro d'Italia because who knows what will happen at the Tour de France. Maybe Jonas Vingegaard recovers. He's 100% on form. Primož Roglič, Remco Evenepoel give a hard time, and Tadej Pogacar loses the Tour de France. But if he leaves this Giro with 10 individual stage victories and the pink jersey and dominating throughout the whole thing, July might not be such a hurt for that whole month of racing at the Tour de France if he just completely annihilated the field here at the Giro d'Italia and it started on stage 1. That is exactly what I'm expecting from Tadej Pogacar. So he's got to keep the breakaway close. They got to come into the Category 2, and Tadej Pogacar is going to have to light everyone up on the Category 2, but they're 110 kilometers into the stage 1 here at the Giro versus last year. They were much further, talking about like 160 kilometers into the stage, and it had more climbs, more hills to wear everyone's legs out there in Spain than we do here in Italy. The course is going to start flat, and then they're going to get into the mountains with three categorized climbs on tomorrow's stage. So really only 2 climbs for Tadej Pogacar's UAE team members to go up the climbs hard and kind of wear the legs out on riders like Geraint Thomas, Ben O'Connor, who are big-time favorites, along with Danny Martinez. Maybe Lipovets is up there, his teammate from Bora Hansgrohe. And so he's got to put some kind of nails into the legs of the competition before 110 kilometers. So I'd expect UAE team members, if they're going for pink with Tadej Pogacar, they're going to drill it up the first 2 categories climbs as fast as they can, get Tadej Pogacar into the last and final category climb on tomorrow's stage 1, and then he has to be close to the break. The last thing you want to do if you're Tadej Pogacar and trying to win tomorrow's stage 1 is give the break too much time and then they make it over that category 2. I'll back you up to the women's race at Liège-Bastogne-Liège where we saw SD Works and we saw Trek leave the breakaway out there a little too long. So when Trek started pulling, because they had Longo Borghini as their big-time favorite, once they started pulling all the way into Rocha Falcon, that brought the breakaway time back down, but they didn't catch him till over the top. And then, of course, Demi Vollering and Longo Borghini had to deal with catching the breakaway riders. They end up losing Liège-Bastogne-Liège to Grace Brown from FDJ because there's only so many attacks they can handle, and both Demi Vollering and Longo Borghini were riding the front more than they had to do covering attacks left and right, especially from the duo from Canyon SRAM there at Liège-Bastogne-Liège, who had not one but two riders in that front group and were doing multiple attacks. So Tadej Pogacar's UAE team Emirates, they don't want to catch the break going over the top of that category 2. Otherwise, Tadej Pogacar, even if he bridges up to these guys, he might have 10 riders up the road, and now he's going to be getting attacked going down the descent before that last little bump, and we start getting into about 4 kilometers and 2 kilometers to go in tomorrow's stage 1. So you got to keep the break close if you're going for that magnificent Giro d'Italia victory that starts here in stage 1, which I got to believe we're going to see out of Tadej Pogacar. Keep the break close. Tadej Pogacar has to catch and pass those riders somewhere up that climb, but you do not want to catch over the top of the climb. Otherwise, they're just going to sit on Tadej Pogacar, rest up a bit, and maybe one or two of them, like we saw from Grace Brown's Liège-Bastogne-Liège victory over the two big-time favorites, Demi Vollering and Longo Borghini, they're hands-down favorites. Maybe we see a Grace Brown take the victory here when we're talking about tomorrow's stage 1. Some kind of version of a Grace Brown, of course, because this is the men's race, not the female race. But it's going to be an exciting first stage because anything's possible. Now, my scenario of how I would race it if I'm UAE Team Emirates, and I'm thinking about the Tour de France. If I'm only thinking about the Giro, and I think the Tour de France could go any way possible, and I want to just be spectacular here at the Giro, I do exactly the plan I just mentioned. But when I'm thinking about the Tour, I'm trying to save energy. Tomorrow, stage 1, we don't need the pink jersey. We can let the break go, no matter who's in that break, as long as they're not on page 2 here. It's the big-time favorites and the 4-star favorites, because Tadej Pogacar is the only 5. But if they're 4-star favorites, you don't necessarily want to have a big break going up the road and give them a ton of time, because then you still have to ride back there. So hopefully you can control the break. You leave somebody from page 3 that's not on that first page 2, like you don't want Geraint Thomas up the road, of course. Most likely they won't try. Most likely, if they do try to win tomorrow's stage, the page 2 riders, they're going to go up on that category 2 climb, the last and final one. One of those teams will be setting the pace like a Bora Hansgrohe rider because they have 2 favorites here with Lipovitz and Danny Martinez that might be able to get over that category 2 climb on stage 1. And then maybe they have Tadej Pogacar, but they can attack him somewhere else. So maybe one of the other teams will ride the front. UAE team members could either let the break go all the way, gain 2 minutes or 3 minutes if they're just 3-star riders up there, and Tadej Pogacar can sit back and let their teams control this first week of racing, at least until we get up to the gravel stages and the individual time trial stages. And then when we get into the real summit finish on stage 8, Plata de Tivo, once they start going up that climb, then Tadej Pogacar can light guys up if you're playing it safe. That's not a bad way to go because remember, tomorrow's race, at only 141 kilometers, it's a very short race. And unlike stage 1 of the Tour de France, like I already explained, it's not so difficult. So for Tadej Pogacar to drop everyone up a 7-kilometer climb at 6.5%, we all know it's possible, right? But then he's going to have to go over the top. He's going to have to do 20 kilometers on his own. Then they have the race leader's jersey. They have more interviews to do after the race, more drug testing to do after the race. So it'll start taking away some energy from Tadej Pogacar as his 3 weeks develop that might affect him at the Tour de France. And I believe you can take a bit more of a rest on tomorrow's stage 1. And even on stage 2, you can just take the jersey on the summit finish on stage 2. When whoever wins stage 1 will ride tempo on stage 2. Tadej Pogacar, UAE team members, possibly help out a little bit on stage 2, and he takes the jersey there. But that's not Tadej Pogacar's experience, right, that we've seen sitting on the Chesterfield from the Slovenian. He goes big, he shines bright, and he blows up bright if it's going to happen. But here at the Giro d'Italia, I think he's going big tomorrow, so you better tune in, like, and subscribe, because tomorrow, stage 1, could be magnificent from Tadej Pogacar, and we start seeing the first steps of going for the double here in 2024 from the Slovenian, because they might just blow everything up on the Category 2, go solo, take the pink jersey, and carry it all the way through the first 21 stages here at the Giro d'Italia. Now, before I go, I want to talk about some of the other riders and their strategies. They're really stuck in a bind. Many times when I was the big-time favorite like Tadej Pogacar and I was racing domestically in the U.S., I can remember racing for Webcor doing the Redlands Bicycle Classic, and on the first real mountain stage, the Oakland stage, we had a breakaway up the road. I wanted to try to save the energy of my teammates like I think Tadej Pogacar should do in tomorrow's stage 1. So I went over to who I thought was the second favorite, Cesar Grajales from Jittery Joe's, and I said, hey, you want to put guys on the front? The gap up to the break up there is at 2.5 minutes. I prefer not to ride my guys hard, but I can bridge the gap going up the last and final climb of Oakland. But can you bridge the gap going up the climb and still keep second on general classification? So all these guys that are going to start racing for second and third becomes really complicated here at the Giro because they're at such a level behind Tadej Pogacar that he can start playing games with them like I always did domestically racing here with the other teams, where I just said, hey, I can bridge the gap up to the break, I can still win the stage, but I'd prefer not to run my team like I told you. If you put your teammates on the front, when we hit the climb, you're getting second on the stage, finishing second overall. But if you don't put your teammates on the front, you got to ask yourself, can you bridge a 2.5 minute gap up to the breakaway that's on stage 1 of the Giro d'Italia? Because we know when we see that Category 1 climb at 7 kilometers long, Tadej Pogacar can bridge a gap of 2 minutes up to whoever's in that breakaway, go over the top of that climb, still win the stage. But the problem is, if he does that, he has to run his team hard. So if he can get other teams talked into it, they might have to do some work that UAE team members then can save their legs. And those other guys on page 2, they're in a predicament right here because Tadej Pogacar is always going to keep a tight eye on Geraint Thomas. And when we looked at Geraint Thomas' interview in the past, he said, hey, when we're talking about the Giro, sometimes it's nice not being the big-time favorite. The problem is when you're the number 2 favorite starting the Grand Tour, Tadej Pogacar and UAE team members are always going to keep an eye on Geraint Thomas, but the other guys further down on that page 2 or even on page 3, Tadej Pogacar might just say, hey, you guys can go up the road and try to win the stages. So when we're looking at a rider like Lipovets or even a Kian Utelbrooks, that might be a rider that has a possibility of winning a stage because he's a little bit further back on page 2 from a Geraint Thomas. But these guys all on page 2, especially the top of the list, when I'm thinking about riders like Ben O'Connor and, of course, Geraint Thomas, and then we look at Danny Martinez from Bora Hansgrohe, those are riders that Tadej Pogacar is thinking, they can't go anywhere. I'm always going to keep an eye on them, and they're going to be forced at some point in time to be able to do the speed of Tadej Pogacar's attack, which we haven't seen very often, right? So it's going to be difficult for those riders to stay with Tadej Pogacar when he starts attacking here in the Giro, but they're forced to riding with Tadej Pogacar at times because they don't have any other choice if they want that second or third on the general classification. If they're all racing just 100% for the win, well, we know they have to make UAE team members do everything on every stage throughout the mountain stages here at the Giro d'Italia, and especially on some of the breakaway stages that are a little more lumpy and bumpy where the sprinter teams won't do work. UAE team members have to ride those whole stages, so Tadej Pogacar is put under the knife from the other riders. But we all know they race for second and third here at the Giro d'Italia for sure. So at some point in time, and I think we'll see it in tomorrow's stage 1 here at the Giro, they might start riding the front for Tadej Pogacar if he just says, hey, I don't want pink jersey right here. I don't care about these guys in the break. I don't care if Bora Hansgrohe have one of the Perepintre brothers up there in the break. They can win the stage. They can take the race leader's jersey, and I don't have to worry about it. Versus the other guys that are racing for second and third, all of a sudden they start panicking because they know Tadej Pogacar can bridge a 2-minute gap up a 7-kilometer climb. They may just pull the brake back for Tadej Pogacar. Everything's back together on that Category 2 climb. And then Tadej Pogacar could either get aggressive at that moment and try to go solo, or if he's going to race it the way I would and everything comes back together at the bottom of the Category 2, I start to follow the other favorites and see if Ineos Geraint Thomas starts attacking, going early on the Category 2. Maybe we see Lipovets going, or we see Danny Martinez going, and then if I'm Tadej Pogacar and saving energy for the Tour, I'm going to follow up that Category 2 climb let them split the group. So instead of like stage 1 of last year's Tour de France where Adam Yates was splitting the group, I'll let the other teams, the guys on the page 2, I'll let them attack up first going up the category 2 climb. I'll let them split the group, and if we're halfway up the climb and I'm Tadej Pogacar and I look back and there's only 3 guys in front of me and no one on my wheel, I light everybody up and I go solo and I take it with 20 kilometers worth of effort. And I didn't have to use much of my UAE team members to bring everything back together because those guys racing for 2nd and 3rd, they're worried about the break. They brought the break back. They split the group going up the last and final climb. And then Tadej Pogacar just has to do an acceleration on 3 or 4 riders instead of using his teammates to go deep because he might need those teammates later here at the Giro d'Italia in the later stages. And as I explained on yesterday's Beyond the Coverage, there's not a ton of depth when we're talking about climbers on UAE team members outside of Rafael Majka. Of course, I know there's Grossschartner, who I forgot in yesterday's video, but Grossschartner, he might be the 5th best climber on UAE team members, or he could be the rider that has a spectacular one mountain stage like we saw at Paris-Nice where his form was fluctuating up and down. Whether or not if he can come good up here, though, in the Giro d'Italia, we still have to see. So Tadej Pogacar, if he's Chris Horner, I'm thinking save energy. If we're watching Tadej Pogacar from the Chesterfield, though, like I believe, we're going to see him light it up throughout tomorrow's stage 1 and try to take the race leader's pink jersey. Make sure you guys like and subscribe. I'll see you guys on the next edition real soon.